Let's take a look at what's going on in oil. We were listening to JD giving his analysis earlier. Prices are down, although they've stabilised from steeper losses earlier on in the session. Investors, as we mentioned, having a slew of news to consider. Sources telling CNN OPEC's meeting with Russia and other producers won't happen until Thursday this week. Later reports suggested a deal is still possible and offered some reassurance. However, there's also a lingering threat, potentially from the US president, who said he might slap tariffs on foreign oil to protect domestic producers. Mike Sommers is the CEO of the American Petroleum Institute, and he met with President Trump on Friday. Joining us now via Skype. Sir, great to have you with us on the show. Wow, there's a lot to discuss in this space. Let's deal with the last point there first. Would in any way tariffs on foreign oil imports into the United States help the situation at this moment and those that you represent?
Thank you very much for having me. We are an organization that does not support tariffs on foreign oil coming into the United States. We don't think that would be good for American consumers. And ultimately, the real people that would be affected by that are the people that refine our oil products. So there's a lot of value that is created by American refiners that take oil from all over the world and turn it into the products that we use on a daily basis, whether it's petrochemicals, gasoline, or some of the household products that we have in our own homes. So we don't think that's a great idea, but we certainly understand that the president is trying to do everything he can to help American producers. So we appreciate the fact that he is involved in this and negotiating with MBS and Putin on the way forward in these markets.
There's a supply situation here in story, and there's also a demand story, which we'll come to. But on the supply side, the message seems to be from the big players like Saudi Arabia, like Russia, we're not going to do these cuts alone. Other big producers like the United States, like Canada, perhaps like Norway, all have to take part here in shoring up prices and restricting supply. Do you agree with that? Should the United States also play its role?
Let's put this into perspective. In the first place, you have to remember that in these countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia, there are very few oil companies. In Saudi Arabia, there's really only one. In the United States, we have over 9,000 producers in this country. And we don't live in a situation where one president or one leader can say, stop producing American oil. So what you're seeing here is producers already responding to market demands. Based on some estimates, you already are starting to see 25 to 30% of American oil go offline as a consequence of low energy prices. And we think that's the right way to handle this, is that the market should be dictating these solutions, not doing it through some kind of government diktat.
How much more supply in the United States has to go offline, though, in order for you as the American Petroleum Institute to say, guys, we've effectively done our fair share of cutting supply. Now you guys have to turn off the taps?
Well, I don't know that anybody can answer that question. I mean, at the end of the day, this is really a demand problem. So usually on a given day before coronavirus, you had about 100 million barrels of oil used every single day in the world. Now we're down to probably about 80 million barrels being used in a given day. That's a huge 20% decline in use, in demand, because people aren't flying, they're not driving, they're not going to work. And as a consequence of that, the real issue here is demand. And the only real solution to a demand problem is to get people back to work and get through the coronavirus issue.
I mean, you raise a great point there that, as we mentioned, there's two sides to this story, and demand is a critical one. Talk to me about the damage that's going to be wrought in the US energy sector. You mentioned jobs, you mentioned businesses. If we're talking about 25 to 30% of capacity at this moment offline, how many businesses and jobs do we lose in this sector, even if this extends only 1, 2, 3 months?
This is a tragedy for American oil and natural gas. Really, after the 2008 financial crisis, what you saw was an energy revolution that really helped get this country back on its feet. And the fact that the United States had become the #1 producer of natural gas and oil in the world was a revolution for the world. And what you're seeing now is some producers like Saudi and Russia trying to take advantage of the situation of low demand and trying to drive these producers out of the market. We don't think that that is appropriate. And we're working with the president and the rest of our government to make sure that producers aren't putting this kind of oil on the market when the world is not demanding it. What we're really concerned about, Julia, is a situation in which we're producing so much that there's no place to put it. World storage is about to fill up. And that is a huge concern, not just for American producers, but it should be concerns for all producers, because low prices ultimately are not good for Saudi Arabia. They're not good for Russia. And you're really going to hit a wall here on storage that could be very damaging, not just to the United States producers, but to world producers.
Mike, what's the solution here? Is it, and have you discussed this with President Trump, bailouts for the oil industry, trying to tackle Russia and the Saudis in some way? Because in my mind, no deal here supports prices without, to our bigger point here, demand meeting the supply at this stage. What's the solution short term?
You put your finger on it, that this is 80% a demand issue. And that demand issue isn't going to be solved until the world economy gets back on its feet. So the solution here really is to get through coronavirus. In the meantime, American producers will have access to the same facilities that are being set up by the Fed and the Department of the Treasury that every other business in America will have. So we need to make sure that that access is there for those new facilities that are being set up, and American producers will participate in them if they need them. But we are not interested in some broad government bailout for the oil and gas industry. This is an industry that understands that the free market is the way that this system has made the United States the #1 producer of natural gas and oil in the world, and we support that system. We're not interested in specific government bailout for oil and gas, and we're very concerned about some of the proposals that are out there that we think would do more harm than good. But we do appreciate the president's attention to this American-made business.
Mike, keep in touch, please. We'll talk about this again because there's,
Thank you, Julia.
I think, going to be no end of this conversation, so it's just the beginning.